Many researchers and students often wonder why research ethics has been prioritised or is said to be important. It's perhaps not self-evident that why it should be considered to be something that one always does before engaging in research with participants, for instance. There are a number of reasons why I think it's not only important but an essential component of quality research. Research integrity, which looks at the integrity of the research record, fundamentally depends upon the trustworthiness of what is in the research record. So the publication or dissemination of research outcomes need to be dependable, because as a researcher, someone looking at the literature, one depends upon taking some of that literature as being conducted to a high level of rigour. One doesn't have to go back and re-explore the basis of that research. One relies on the outcomes to take one's own work further. From an ethical perspective, I think that's a fairly clear-cut issue. When it comes to ethics of research, in terms of participant engagement, collecting data from participants, it is a little less clear why that would be important for a researcher. What benefits are there to doing that? One way one can think about this is from a compliance perspective. So an organisation has a responsibility legally for insurance and so on to ensure the research conducted is done within certain bounds and done responsibly. But that's not an ethical response, that's a legal one, an insurance or compliance based one. So what are the ethical or moral reasons why research ethics review, thinking about ethical considerations, is important, and why, moreover, is it essential part of quality research? I think one can think about it from a variety of perspectives. And like many things in life, to consider something deeply, to consider something from a fundamental basis, sometimes it's better to take a step back and think about it or look at it from another perspective. The perspective as a research ethicist, my interest here is, firstly, one may have a perspective on your research. You may have a perspective on what benefits may come from doing a piece of research. But it's very easy to be caught up in your own particular interests, to become single-minded about the pursuit of a goal, to getting outcomes of various sorts or whatever it might be. And it's easy in doing so to treat human participants in research as simply the provider of data, the place where I get my data, rather than as people. And the important thing in terms of thinking ethically about research is to avoid that position, to think of the people one works with as people. My perspective, if I'm a researcher on a particular moral or ethical issue, might not be the same as the person I'm hoping to engage in my research. One needs to take that person's views into consideration, particularly when involving them in research that may be controversial, may expose them to risks of various sorts, or may even harm them in a variety of ways. And one of the key elements of research ethics review, which hinges on consent, is to ensure that participants have that option to know, to be considered from that perspective, so that one doesn't treat them merely as the place where data is to be found, but that they are actually living, breathing, and people with their own interests, and to make sure those interests are treated with care. That's why it's essential part of research, and not simply an instrumental or a utilitarian way of obtaining data. One thing that many institutions need to be aware of are the sources of guidance, policy, sets of principles that are available that provide expertise and authoritative support in developing institutional training and support and systems for research ethics and integrity. There are a number of ways in which you can find out more about those things, but it would probably be useful to think about three different kinds of sets of guidance, types of guidance and principles that are available. Firstly, there are broad international statements and codes which seek to set out a broad framework for thinking carefully about ethical issues and research integrity issues. Two important ones in that respect are the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity and the Montreal Statement on Research Integrity, both of which are aimed at assisting national and institutional codes to reflect a high level of recognition of basic principles for research integrity that would be accepted internationally. So they tend to be quite broad brushstroke, they are applicable and usable in different contexts, but they give the basic standards or the basic issues that ought to be considered when developing in-house institutional policy or codes. The Singapore and Montreal statements are both freely available online and were developed by a large group of international experts in the field at over a number of years at international conferences. Second level would be national guidance and codes. In the UK, we are lucky that we have several authoritative organisations. In terms of research integrity, the UK Research Integrity Office has been established for a number of years and has not only an advisory service but also a set of documents which can be used to develop procedure as well as policy and codes. The Association for Research Ethics has codes and guidance that are applicable specifically to research ethics review as used by ethics committees, and also supporting material for learning more about particular types of research and ethical issues that arise in particular kinds of research methods. And then the Committee on Publication Ethics, or COPE, looks specifically at issues to do with authorship and publication and various issues that might arise during the process of dissemination and publication. Those three organisations, or UK organisations with international recognition, are very useful resources for institutions and individual researchers and students looking to develop or learn more about research ethics and integrity. There's lots of ways that organisations of higher education can approach their responsibilities from an ethical perspective. But there is a lot of confusion, I think, over the definition of research ethics or research integrity. And I think it's important for institutions to think very carefully not only about what it is that they're trying to do when they talk about research ethics and integrity with their students and their staff, what they're doing it for instance, but also to be very clear about what they mean by research ethics and research integrity, how they provide guidance, and also how those elements of their work as institutions are organised, departmental responsibilities, communication, reporting, and all of those sorts of things. So just to sort of clarify some of the relationships as I see it, one can talk about research governance, and research governance is a field of legal and ethical issues related to research. It covers quite a wide range of issues. Its background is mainly from health and bioclinical research. It's widely applied now towards a sort of general approach to compliance, legal and ethical issues in research. Research ethics is a very specific way of thinking about research activity with a priority on moral considerations, the way one treats other persons, your responsibilities in terms of the environment, dealing with other researchers and so on, and covers a wide range of issues. It's quite an undifferentiated field, lots of scope for confusion, disagreement and so on, like many issues in ethics are. And research integrity applies to, I think, two things that are important for researchers. First of all, the integrity of the research record, the results of research, the way it's published and disseminated, the research that is used by others to take forward their own work, so the research record itself, the integrity of that, and also the integrity of the researcher, so therefore personal conduct and the conduct of researcher and the activity that goes into research. So it's got a sort of twofold meaning. But the relationship between research ethics and research integrity, I think, is very interesting, which is which has priority. Is integrity a subset of ethics, or is ethics a subset of integrity? It's a very interesting question, and I think you could spin it in different ways. But if you look at the Concordat to support research integrity from UUK, which is the predominant UK code at the moment that universities are trying to implement, you see that the way it's being positioned in that document is that research integrity is seen as the umbrella concept. And research ethics is kind of part of that when it's applied in its narrow sense of being about protection of participants, consent of participants, and confidentiality of data and things like that. So my preferred way of thinking is that there are broad moral concerns in research, which is research ethics. Research integrity is about protection of the research record, ensuring its integrity and the conduct of researchers. And then a narrow sense of research ethics, as in research ethics approval, is where we're thinking about the things that we need to do in advance of projects being conducted, so that we are ensuring that ethical considerations have been paid to the work that's proposed. So there's a sort of nesting set of concepts in research ethics and research integrity. But I don't think it really matters as long as you've thought about how those things affect your institution's support and guidance and how it works for your organisation.